Sam and Wendy, you guys ready?
Yeah, as ready as I'll ever be this morning. Let's do this. All right, so good morning. I'm Sam, and my lovely co-host Greg is with us today too. And we have a special guest, Wendi Rose.
Hello, everybody.
Yes.
Great to be here.
Oh, let's back up. This is Spirituality Live. During the pandemic days, usually we stream from the Awaken Center, but I am at my home, and Wendy and Sam are at their home.
They are. He's not lying.
And we stream twice a month, the first and third Wednesday of each month at 11:11. And today's topic is learning from your inner child. And we have an inner child expert, Wendi Rose.
He's an expert too. He's really good.
True.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't want to downplay Sam, but, trying to talk up our guest.
It's a very easy thing to do. She's very talk-upable.
Is that?
No.
Okay.
So learning from your inner child, that is a topic that Greg and I poured over minutes deciding last night. It was a pretty good focus. What does learning from your inner child look like, and why? Why would you want to incorporate your inner child into life's big messes? Well, the idea being that our creative children are creative, right? They have all this imaginative potential. They see the world upside down, inside out. They have a way of looking at things that as adults, we are much more organized and trained to have certain attitudes and perspectives, whereas children naturally take the world in a totally different way. So when we face big challenges as adults, our thinking is very often limited just because we've been trained by our experiences and through trial and error of life. So when we tap into the creative power of our inner children, we unlock a potential to look at our lives, our current situations from different perspectives, and open up new avenues of thinking and find some things that we didn't see before, which is vitally important, especially if we're distracted from our normal cycles. We can't go to work. We can't do all the things that we're used to doing. Some really big things might be coming up for you guys. I know for us, we've been going through our own processes, and using these tools that we already know has helped us to move through those things that would otherwise be huge roadblocks. And we're finding that we're able to move forward in this situation. Our agony in it is quite minimized, and we're actually having a really fun time because we're able to be creative, productive, and manage our fear in a very adult, integrated way. Wendi, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, well, it's about managing and taking care of those inner children that live within us. They're a part of who we are, and so if we can, it's so important that the adult be present and not allow our inner children to go absolutely wild right now and run our life. So, yes.
Greg,
and I want to say too, this is it's perfect timing for this discussion too. I mean, we were talking about having Wendi on, months ago, and we definitely wanted to talk about the inner child and bring it up. And I mean, it's important anytime talking about connecting with your inner child, letting your inner child out, listening to your inner child, healing your inner child. There's so much inner child work that's so important.
Yes.
But right now is an amazing opportunity because so many people are home, right? So everyone's home. If you're with a family, if you have kids, regardless of the age of them, it's an amazing and beautiful time to connect with your own kids. And especially if they're younger, take some time. I know it's funny because it kind of goes both ways. I've been talking to people, with what's going on right now, with the lockdowns and people being home. And it seems like kind of two things are happening. Either people are not working or barely working, or people are even busier than they usually are, depending on their job. But regardless of where that falls, even if you're very busy right now, definitely if you're home and your kids are home because they're home from school, take the time to pay a little more attention to them, to spend some more time with them, and to play with them. It's so important to play. It's so important to play. And that's part of this. There's so much we can learn from our actual children, but it's also important that we listen to our inner child and let our inner child out and play. So, what I really wanted to stress is if you have a chance to spend some time with your children since they're home from school, carve out that time right now. It's so important for you and for them to really strengthen that bond, and for you to just allow yourself that time to play. If you're home alone, you don't have kids, or even if you live with somebody, but or if you live alone, it's such an opportune time to shift your focus to yourself, to work on yourself, maybe start a meditation practice. If you don't, just, look into your past and some of your issues and all that kind of stuff. And in all this, we really want to stress how important it is to let your child out and to connect with your child during all this and to let it out. And you have an especially amazing opportunity, once in a lifetime offer just for you. If you were home alone, no one is watching, no one is judging,
Right.
Turn up the radio, dance, sing, play, go jump on your bed, do something creative, get some blocks out and make a castle. You have such an opportunity to do just all kinds of fun, silly, goofy stuff and really let your inner child just totally free, and nobody's watching.
Yeah, that's a great point. Mm-hmm. From another perspective, if you find that you are facing fears that you don't know how to wrestle with, fears, emotions, things that we've repressed and hidden and tucked away, things we call the shadow. Now that we're set off of our patterns, work isn't there in the same ways. We may have more time to be with ourselves, whether we're with family, with kids. We might not be able to decompress. I mean, work for many of us is not necessarily an escape, but a relief from, what home can be. And home after 2-3 weeks could be an absolute pressure cooker for some of us. So it's really important that we manage the internal pressures within us in appropriate ways. And so we'd like to talk about what that might look like, and how can you create space in your own life, in your own home, if you don't have the enough rooms to get out. How can you create activities that are engaging and fun in new and different ways, where you can change how your stress is coming out? It doesn't have to be tucked away and hidden. If you have anger, you're allowed to express anger. You're allowed to be angry. This is an impossible situation with many things that are overwhelming. There are absolutely many overwhelming factors here. So anger is an entirely legitimate emotion to feel right now. Let's not make any bones about it. Mm-hmm. And how we express that anger is very important. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We talked about that in our last episode too. If you go back and look at our last episode of Spirituality Live with me and Sam, we were talking about, really connecting with your emotions and letting whatever's coming up right now during this time come up and being with it and sitting with it. Sam, the one thing I forgot to actually mention to you with preparing for today is, I don't know if you have kind of like a tip list, like five top 5 tips with, connecting with your inner child, or what to look for with your inner child, as far as, healing and being with, and, allowing it to come out and play,
Sure. Step 1 is being aware of your emotions, your feelings, right? That's one of the very dynamic layers that we as people have. We have feelings, we have emotions. And in most settings, we filter those into, well, I'm allowed to show this at work. I'm allowed to have this for my family. I feel safe expressing these emotions in these situations. So now that those rules may not apply in the same ways, your emotions are still, they're still there, just as powerfully, if not more so. And there's likely ones to be more present that you're not used to dealing with. So be aware of your emotions, first off. A very helpful way to do that is to, even if you have to lock yourself in the bathroom and spend some time there, take a pad of paper and write down the emotions you're feeling, and keep it to the basic 5. There's sadness, anger, shame, joy, and help me out, what's the mad, sad, glad, afraid, shame. Yeah.
Guilt?
Yeah. Shame. Yeah. Mad, sad, glad, afraid, shame. And there's many words we have, but those are the 5 basic emotions. Write them down. Practice, if it's challenging for you, knowing I've got a mixture, it's a ball of wax. Okay. It's often multiple emotions going on at the same time. You might have your fear and your shame mixed together around not being able to pay your bills, or worried about not being able to pay your bills. And that fear and shame trap can hinder us from being able to think creatively about, oh, how can I be in my moment now? Because we can't change this moment. We're on active quarantine for possibly the next 4 weeks from things I've heard. So we have to get real about what's our strategy, our adult strategy for getting through this well. And part of that incorporates bringing our inner children, that playful energy, to bear again. Because this is a whole new situation that we haven't faced before. So we need to be creative about it. And there's a place for our fear, and how we manage our fear matters, because then we can treat our spouses, our loved ones, the people that we are around differently. We can make space for their fears, perhaps. If we're processing our own, and maybe that's just communicating it. Pick your spouse and say, hey, I want to admit and own I'm afraid about paying my bills this month. And I have shame around that. And I have anger around that shame. And feel
That's
it.
awesome.
Take some time to process it with someone who you trust to be non-reactionary, and then make an agreement going into it. I have feelings that I feel very strongly, and I want to have a safe place to bring it. Can you just listen? You don't have to fix me. You don't have to react or do anything. I just need someone to listen to what I'm feeling while I share it. And if I end up crying and falling on the floor and blubbering about it, just hold space while I do that and hand me a tissue when I'm done. And help me wipe up and clean up afterwards. I have to get these emotions out. So that's the first thing. Process your emotions in a safe, direct way, as opposed to sideways where we stuff it and then we explode at the end of the day when we've just had it. So that's the first thing. Process.
Yeah, and that's that's a great way to frame it, with having that conversation with somebody. And I'm going to tie that back into the inner child, because as children, not everybody's taught to express emotions and how to express emotions. Right. So, when we actually, as adults now, because we weren't taught these skills, it seems very awkward to then have to talk very simply about how we feel, and it might even sound silly, talking to your significant other, your spouse, whatever, and say, I feel kind of sad, afraid, guilty. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, but sometimes you have to reduce it to that simple of a talk, so that you're not clouding what you're trying to express, and you're not trying too hard to sound adult. It's not about that. It's not about trying to find the exact right phrase. It's just keep it very simple emotions. And again, this is what we can learn from children too. Like, and I think it's important to kind of go back and forth, because it's about what we're learning from our inner child, but it is also about what we're learning just from children in general, how they behave and how they express, and getting back to allowing ourselves to behave and express that same way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very well put. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, Wendi, what are some ways that we could tap into our inner children with all this noise in our head, with all this situational energy that we might be feeling? How can we get in touch with our inner child?
Well, allowing your inner child to really speak and express through you, just what Greg was saying. I've really gotten great at expressing what maybe one of my inner children is feeling, and really just allowing myself to whine and complain and cry, because that inner child wants to be seen and wants to be heard. And once they're seen and they're heard, then there's that space for you as the adult to then be aware of what is going on and rise above it.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Sam's really great at holding space. Last night my little girl was just afraid and sad and angry, and I just went to her and I said, as a little kid would, they feel safe with another person to say, I just need to be held. And so thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And it does take courage to be vulnerable that way, to really allow your inner children to speak through you. But it's what will free you.
Absolutely. And a lot of, as adults now, a lot of how we repress our emotions and how we act around how we feel and how we react, a lot of that comes from being kids and how we were treated and how our emotions were either welcomed or shut down, So as a child, because we're not really learning properly. I mean, things are shifting, but for our generation growing up, I mean, there was still a lot of emotions being repressed, and it's not okay to, especially like we get into the gender thing, like as a guy, it's not okay to cry and all this kind of stuff, So there's a lot of things that are repressed as kids that now as adults, affect us in negative ways, and we have to retrain ourselves to express ourselves, to connect with our inner child, to allow ourselves. And right now we're just talking specifically about emotions, but I mean, it's so important just to connect with that inner child emotionally, but also to let that fun, playful nature come out, and that creative nature be expressed, and that curious nature be expressed. All those innate natures that we have as children, so many of them get shut down along the way. And as a conscious adult, it is now comes back to us to make a decision and to make a choice to say, I want to allow the best qualities of my childhood and how I was as a child. There's the best qualities of that to come out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So step 2 or item 2 that we can use to engage in learning from our inner child is get in touch with your body. Right? We talked about emotions, but our physicality has needs, and so if we tap into the infantile level of our experience, the whole role of an infant, its sole purpose in life is to have its needs met, to be nurtured. And if we had experienced growing up traumas, or were separated, or weren't nurtured, certain needs weren't met, we may hold that tension in our bodies, and then a big situation like this might trigger that. And we may not have it in a cognitively formed aware place. So what we can do to delve into that level of it is to be aware of your appetite, be aware of your energy level, be aware of, do you need a nap? Can you conceive of what it feels like in your body when you need a nap? My mom has said many wise things over the years that have stuck with me. One of them is, she told me, I never trust any of my thoughts when I'm hungry or when it's after 11 o'clock at night. And that really hit me, because it helped me see for myself how I can self-assess and go, you know what? There's certain times where it's completely relevant for me to say, I'm a knucklehead right now, and nothing I'm thinking or feeling has any appropriate bearing on my life at all. I don't need to follow anything I'm thinking right now. I need to go eat. And then after I eat, or I take that nap, then I feel refreshed and my mind clears, and that what I felt was a strong emotional energy was just the ripple coming from the physical body saying, hey, I'm past due, I'm really hungry, or I'm really tired, and I'm going to start falling into that tantrum place, and I become a toddler, and a kicking, screaming, whiny toddler who's hungry. Anyone with parents totally gets that. So do we acknowledge those needs within ourselves? Hopefully, yes. And oftentimes, not everything that we need we pay attention to, and sometimes we actively avoid it. So,
yeah, and I'm gonna bring it back to again, learning from the child. As a child, an actual child, not the inner child, you have nap time, and you have you go to school, you have your lunch, and you have your snacks and all that kind of stuff, and if a child is tired, we don't tell him, no, you're not allowed to sleep. It's not time, or no, you're not done your work. If a child's tired, you put him to sleep, and it's the most beautiful, adorable thing watching a child sleep, and even with the food, a child's hungry. If your kid is hungry, you're not going to be like, too bad, you got to wait, but somehow we lost that as adults. The idea of an adult stopping in the middle of their workday to go take a 20-minute nap to refresh and realign, to so many people seems crazy. But if that's what you need, that's what you need. And you're actually causing yourself to be less productive as an adult if you're not listening and allowing yourself to, put aside the work for a moment and go take that nap, and then you'll be more productive when you come out of it. So it is funny how many things that are okay for kids, and then for some reason we make them not okay as an adult.
Right. And that ties right into the third thing that we can do is pay attention to our thoughts, right? Our thoughts of, well, yes, I'm going to muscle through this because that's what a guy's supposed to do. I'm supposed to just take whatever pain I'm feeling, stuff it, and be productive anyhow. I can't nap. Naps are for pussies. And that's very irresponsible thinking, because it sets up a standard that's harmful, first off, for ourselves, but then we reinforce that societal standard of guys are not allowed to show weakness at all. And that's entirely damaging, and I don't think that needs to be explained, but if we did need to explain it, look around at the health of men in your life that you know who don't take care of themselves. Their bellies may be swollen. They may have psoriasis on their skin. They may be aging early. Their backs may be horrible. They may have limited to low energy. There's so many indicators of poor health that go along with early aging. In our 40s and 50s, we should be in the pinnacle of health, and so often that's when our bodies start falling apart. I've seen it in the men I grew up with in the construction industries, the car industries. I've seen so many men who in their mid-40s have just decided that, oh, I'm just getting older. This is what happens when I'm 45. And of course, that's just a story that we're following. And the reason that we're in that position is because we're following that story blindly. We can change that story. We can change our diets. We can change our attitudes about what life and aging look like. And yes, we're going to get old. We're going to fall apart. We're going to die someday. But we don't have to die early. And we don't have to choose to have poor health on the way towards dying. I know an 80-year-old man who every year did a two-week-long hike in the Alps. He was 80 and he had a nice straight back. He had a straight back and he had a straight mind because he cultivated that his whole life. And he gave himself the opportunities to enjoy that body and to push the body. So what we put into our lives from our mental reasoning, from the belief systems that we hold, matter tremendously about the outcomes that we have in our lives now. Our life is our own fault. The way we think about ourselves and think about the world create the experience that we have. And there's a ton of stuff we don't control, but when we don't use the control that we do have in a good way, that is our fault. And that's up to us, and we can always change that. That's the nice thing about it. We can always tap in and change our thinking and say, am I getting the results I want? Do I feel good in my body? Am I happy in my emotions? Well, how does that relate to my mind? Is my mind telling me a bunch of rubbish that maybe I just never thought to challenge? Well, this big upset in our lives is a prime opportunity for a lot of things to get looked at. So you can write down your thoughts. You can make 2 columns, thoughts about myself, thoughts about the world, and just look at them, read them, write them down so you can see them. And instead of being this inner monologue you don't question, it's going to have to go through the eyes and the whole editing part of the brain, and you're going to notice things. You go, that's a crazy statement. How is that in there? You'll surprise yourself with what you see. So that's the third thing that you can do to get honest about what's going on inside your head.
Yeah, and a great tip along with the list is, and again, circling back to childhood and really connecting with what your inner child now went through, and mentally going back to the past and trying to recall events and reactions and all that kind of stuff, and tying it into new beliefs that you have. Make a list of, things that you believe about yourself, whether they're true or not. You can go back later and then really look at them and realize how many beliefs we have about ourselves that aren't true. They were beliefs that we adopted or that were told to us, But I think it's also important to make a list of things from your mom and things from your dad or whoever your parents were or whoever raised you, to see, these are the things that, these are like the traits that I got from my parents, from this parent and from this parent. This is a belief that I got from this parent or this parent. This is whatever I picked up, some kind of habit that I picked up from this parent. And it's a great way to really, really delve in and look at behaviors that you exhibit. And I think it's an important word, because behaviors that exhibit, like too often we embody it and we say, I am this, I am stupid, I am fat, I am no good, and it's changing that wording too. It's, I exhibit a belief that I am not smart enough. And where did that come from? Oh, I remember my dad always telling me that I was dumb or stupid or whatever, So it's a great way to do a little digging and time traveling and actually look at where some of this stuff came from, because a lot of times it is tied back to a specific parent, and there's also traits, and it's also important to look at the positive traits too. There's so many positive traits that we have, so that we're not just condemning our parents with oh, they gave me all these bad beliefs, right? There's so many good traits that we get from our parents, and I think it's a beautiful thing too, especially if you have some issues with a certain parent. Like you might get along fine with your dad and have some issues with your mom, or vice versa. The parent that you don't get along with, that you have a little bit of push and pull with, look at some of the traits that were passed down that were positive. And it's also important to look at, if it's not directly a positive trait, every trait that was passed on molded us, and the new Mr. Rogers movie with Tom Hanks, there's an awesome scene in a restaurant where they have a moment of silence and they think about and give gratitude to all the people that created their being, on every level. Because even the things that happen to us, and that, especially from our parents, that we see as negative, help mold us into the people that we are and help compel us to have a drive for a certain, way of living. Anything you want to add to that?
That was really well said.
Awesome.
I loved it. Yeah, well done. So with this next thing, the fourth thing, Wendy is really good at creating space. I'm going to put Wendy on the under the hot light for a moment. Wendy is excellent at creating space, whether it's in the kitchen, in the living room, in her healing room. As long as I've known her, she has a way of, even if a place seems full and packed, she has a way of just placing things, and maybe it's her feng shui, but she makes decisions from a place of internal organization. So Wendy is, to me, I see Wendy as a master of internal space organization, right? Things it's not the mind, it's not emotions, it's not the physicality, it's what we might call the being. So Wendy, as a space creator, what can people do to affect the spaces that they're in?
Well, it really depends on what's going on inside of you. How full are you inside? Are you full with from your past, traumas from your past? Or is there an openness and an emptiness to then be filled? One of the things why I'm so passionate about the inner child work is that as I started to work with that wounded part of my little self, that's when I could really start to open up and that space within me. And one thing that I'd really love to share is one of my favorite moments in my life as a little girl that was a turning point for me. And there was something so beautiful and wonderful that came out of it, but also something that created such stuckness and blocks in my life. So
Yes, shame was a big piece of it.
Shame was a big piece of it. So I'm going to go as brief as I can with the story. So I was 7 years old, and as a child, even younger than 7, I just knew that I was here for something really important, and I wanted to know what my purpose was. And I would always look up to the sky and say, what's my purpose? Until one day, I overheard my mother on the telephone, and she was talking to someone, and she said the words, I have to go find myself. And once I find myself, I know I'm going to be okay. Well, that was it. That just was like the light bulb went off and the heavens opened up, and that was my purpose. I was to go find myself. And so what I did, now again, I'm 7 years old, I wanted all the kids that I knew from school to join me, to go and find themselves. So, and I was also as a child So for me to really come out and be passionate and driven and wanting everybody to follow along with me, I knew this was my purpose. So the next day I went to school, and this was during the lunchtime, and I would go to each table and I would say, I'm going to go find myself. Come on along. Now, again, I didn't know what that really meant, but I knew that it was my purpose, and that was my expansion and my freedom. So all the kids just looked at me like, what does that mean? They just looked at me like I was totally weird. But I had one little boy who was actually a neighbor of mine, said, sure, I'll go find myself with you. I said, great, I'll pick you up after school. So at that time, I lived about 2 miles from school, so it was safe enough for children to walk to school. When I got home after school, I actually went to my mother and I said, I am going to go find myself today. And I'm so grateful for the mother that I have. She said, that's wonderful. Have a great time. I said, can I have some cookies along the way? So she gave me a bag of cookies, and there I was, and I walked across the street, picked up my neighbor, the little boy, and I said, let's go. So we walked back to school, but then we walked past the school. So my house was more towards the front of the school, but there was an unknown territory I've never been to in back of the school. There was woods, and there was like a little store, and there were some houses. So I said, okay, we're just gonna go and we're gonna just walk this way. And so we were sort of in the woods, but half in the woods and half there was like a store. I think back then it was like Five and Dime store. And I said, here we are. And he said, well, now what? And I said, well, we're gonna go find ourselves, but we have to just be very still, and it's gonna happen. And so I didn't have any fear. There was no fear whatsoever. I didn't have any fear of food. Well, first of all, we ate all the cookies that my mom gave us, so we didn't have any food. We didn't have any money. We had no place to sleep. We didn't have any comforts. But I was so driven by spirit that I knew that I was going to be okay. So what happened about a couple hours later, and we're just standing there, and I'm just beaming. So we see these 3 women coming towards us. And I lived in a cul-de-sac, so all the mothers knew all the children. And so it was this little boy's mother and 2 other mothers. My mother was not in the mix because she was, I think, out at the store at the time. And so what happened was this little boy went home to tell his siblings that we were going to go run away. So that's what his mom and these 2 other mothers were told, wow, they're going to go run away. So they came to us very upset and said, why did you run away? And so my friend, he just looks at me and points to me like, it was her. And I looked at them and I said, I didn't run away. That's not what we did. We went to go find ourselves. And it was in that moment where all 3 of these women looked at me, and they looked at me like I had 5 heads. And there was such shame, and they didn't get it. They couldn't understand. And so it was in that moment when I got that not everybody is awake. That it was like, I thought that people that were older, they were wiser, they had wisdom, that they were awake. But I got at 7 years old, wow, they are asleep. They don't get it. And so I got from that moment that I'm not to look for myself outside of myself, but within myself. But then there was another piece. And that piece was that I was shamed. And so in that moment, that little girl had that belief of, well, if I'm seen and I'm heard and I'm passionate and I'm going for my purpose, I'm going to be shamed, and I'm going to be let down, and I'm going to be shut off. And so that was a big moment in my life where I didn't really move myself forward. I didn't allow myself to step into things that I knew it was part of my purpose and part of my joy. But I was afraid to be seen, to be heard, and to be shamed.
Yeah.
So that's how you can have a moment like that can change your whole entire world.
Yeah.
So since I've acknowledged that 7-year-old, And my adult went to go pick her up and said, "Hey girlfriend, here I am. You found yourself. Now let's fly high and let's be seen and be heard." And if it wasn't for that moment, that realization, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking, because this would have been the most frightening thing, to be seen and be heard. The fear of being shamed.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's go in a little more depth about really connecting with the child and finding where the issues are, helping to heal the child, and then helping to allow you to live now as an adult, hand in hand, caring for that child and allowing it to express, right? So, because that happens to so many of us. There's some incident as a child that shuts us down and creates trauma. And it doesn't have to be, trauma can be on every level, even the smallest trauma, or what someone else can brush off as like, you call that trauma, right? It's all individual to us. The smallest little thing that may be insignificant to someone else may be huge to us, as a child in our life, and it could just be a single incident, a single word, and it can totally shut us down and create a belief that we then carry through our whole life if we never look at it and reverse it. So Wendi, tell us a little bit about the process of digging in, connecting, finding these traumas, helping work through them, all that kind of stuff. How did you get to where you are now, this beautiful rose blooming?
Well, it's inner work. It's doing your inner work, however that looks like for you. For me, it was working with my cellular memory and going deep in, I'm an IET master instructor trainer, so I work with the IET system. But there's a lot of different energy type of healing that you can do for yourself to help to dig in deep and go into clearing the cellular memory and all the traumas that you've experienced. But also...
And meditation. We're going to do a meditation, right?
Yes, we're going to be doing an inner child meditation. And again, the inner child work, which is very, very, very specific, and going and connecting to all those wounded parts of your child, all those moments in your life that have really caused challenges for you in your life today. And so I've done a lot of inner child work, and from doing the inner child work inspired me to create my own program, to go really deep and to incorporate not only the mind and the mind therapy, but also connect with the soul. So it's bringing in the mind and the body and the soul through doing deep inner child work that has really helped me today. And so that's why I'm so inspired. This is why I've created a program to be able to help as many people that have really been stuck in that, wounded little child. And you can be free from it. And it's a life changer. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so important. It's so important to do this work, for us, me, Sam, and Wendi, and for a lot of people that are watching, we what I say live, spiritual lives, really conscious lives and mindful lives, wanting to improve ourselves, wanting to have more peace in our life, and wanting to walk more mindfully and consciously in the world to share that, But even kind of looking, even kind of pushing aside like a spiritual path, for anyone that's out there, every human being has, trauma on some level and issues on some level, and they're stuck on some level. And the inner child work is an amazing way to release that and free yourself and free your energy, and it's so important to go back and care for that child and see where it was wounded and hurt and take steps to heal it, And again, we're talking about some ways you can do it on your own, and making lists, meditating, all that stuff's a great way. But like with anything in life, when you have someone supporting you, guiding you, helping you, it just makes it so much easier, So Sam and Wendi do that. And Wendy's been doing this a long time, really focusing on the inner child, on two ends. Cause she's one of the most playful people I know, and she loves letting the playful, happy child out and be expressed, but she's also gotten there because she's really done the work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to do the inner work. And it's not as scary as some people may think. It's not like, oh no, I got to go back and I got to relive that trauma. No, that's not what it's about. Not at all. It's going back and connecting to that little part of ourselves, that afraid part of ourselves, and taking that part, and we take it in the program, we call it the heart garden. So it's that sacred, peaceful, calming space that's within us. We all have that. And bringing that child home within us. Did you want to add to that?
I always like adding to things. So I don't know if it's possible. I'd like to do a quick poll, and you can chat it in if you want. Just a quick poll. How many of you pray? Even once a week, once a month, or daily? How many of you pray? If you want to, do like a little thumbs up thing. And when you do pray, when you have prayed, have you ever experienced that shift within yourself? It's not a mental shift. It's not an emotional shift as much. It's a shift deeper than all that affects all those other layers. Have you experienced that shift? And so I see a whole bunch of likes. Awesome, cool, good for you. Prayers, it's beautiful.
And why are you asking, Sam?
Well, so I'm asking because that's the place, because it builds context. The context of so much of the energy work, where we've all heard about energy work and mysticism and meditations. There's so many ways to do that. Those are all ways of praying. Those are all ways of engaging in that space that we feel in prayer, when we shift in that deep core part of ourselves that then affects our physicality, our emotionality, our mentality, right? That's the core spiritual place. When we pray, something significant happens. We shift on a fundamental level. We get in touch with ourselves on a fundamental level. And so when we work in that fundamental level place, the roots of our traumas and our joys are like tap roots that are anchored to that space. So all the traumas we have in life, their roots are connected to that core place. So if we're going to uproot a trauma, we can talk about it and operate out here and just eat away at the enamel on the top of the molar, right? To use a tooth analogy. Or we can go into that prayer space, the energetic space, the metaphysical space, the core part of ourselves, and we can work on the root there. And we can go back, because energy, space and time are mutable to certain parts of our existence. Our memory is one spot where time and space don't matter. I can sit in a memory, and if it's a powerful memory of an uncomfortable experience, I might salivate, I might swallow out of nervousness, I might hum to myself. I'm going to feel nervous. My body's going to change. My thinking's going to change. So that's a real thing. So memories exist outside of space and time. It's a very peculiar phenomenon. So we do have that part of ourselves that isn't bound by time and space that we can work with. So we can work with our core traumas from that place. So we can go back with guided meditation and with energy work and with, really, it is human self-will and focus. Our tools help our clients focus to that core place where they can then go to that core moment and have a different experience. We can shift that trauma from being something that we feel and we're stuck in. We can go, I acknowledge it happened. I can't unmake it happen, but I can change how I am in relation to it. I can disconnect from that root, and I can let the root go. The memory will be there.
How you feel about it.
The fact of it will be there, but how it affects us can change.
Yeah.
We had a client years ago in our inner child program who had, for her whole adult life, been suffering from terror and physical pain, clenching of teeth. She hadn't gotten a full night's sleep without the use of medication in at least a decade, if not 18 years. And in going through this program, she had gone to key points of intense abuse that she suffered over a long period of time. And as we went through each stage of the program, we did another piece of disconnecting the taproot, so to speak. And when we got to the end of the line and did the last clearing, it took about 4 or 5 sessions within the program, which was 9 sessions anyhow. It took a long time range in her chapter of life to do it. But once we got it all, it shifted for her, and she was able to go home and have the first full night of sleep without pain and without medication. She was off the medication within a week and hasn't gone back, and she hasn't had a relapse. That cured her pain because she resolved that part of herself where the pain was coming from. So our program is not meant to diagnose and treat and make those claims. I want to make that clear. And it can significantly impact and affect your life in very positive ways because you're connected in very positive, profound ways. When you get into the inner workings of how you are put together and how you're processing your energy and what happens and how your triggers all work, when you get inside that part of yourself, you can make some very significant changes in a very short amount of time.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's what the inner child work focuses on, and incorporates Wendy's ability to hold amazing space and bring the transitive energy focus. She's able to help clients focus that energy and shift it. And we work together doing the program. I'm obviously really good at talking. So I bring a lot of the mental engaging components because that's a part of it too. We have to change our thinking, our reasoning. As we change our core, we have to help our minds catch up. Otherwise we change, but we might not behave like we've changed. So it takes both the inner and the outer layers incorporating together to integrate the change into life.
As well as we work together also in the inner child program because we support the feminine and the masculine, right? So the mother and the father aspect. What happens if, at some point in your childhood, you had a trauma with your father? And so here comes Sam as a healthy father, and I, represent the mother. So it works beautifully. So this time for the meditation.
Yeah, well, before we get to the meditation, I want to just kind of recap, sum up, give some tips on everything we're talking about here. So learning from your inner child, what is it that we are learning from our inner child or can learn from our inner child? And please jump in here with this. But, we're looking at learning where beliefs come from, learning where some trauma comes from, tapping back into the child to learn how to overcome and release, those traumas and beliefs. We're looking at our inner child to learn how to go back and get into playing again and understanding how important it is to allow more joy in your life, so and maybe even this is a little list we can pull together and post along with the video later. But what else am I missing, or do you want to expand on a little bit, but just on what are some of the key things that we are learning by doing the inner child work and by connecting with our inner child?
Go for it.
Yeah, Sam.
I was reading some comments, so could you pose that question again, please? I was distracted. I know.
Yeah.
All that build up, and I missed the question.
I just want to sum up, some of the important things that we can learn and discover from our inner child and connecting with our inner child. So, what are some other things, or just to sum up, what's the most important things that we get from our child? And I was saying that we can look at find beliefs that we've adopted. We can look at trauma that we've had. We can look at ways to allow ourselves to be playful and joyous again. So let's kind of sum it up for people before we wrap up and go into the meditation.
Sure. So the first one was get in touch with your emotions. The 5 basic emotions: mad, sad, glad, afraid, and shame, which is also guilt. So get in touch with your emotions, be aware of your emotions so that you can communicate them effectively, and at the very least, not repress them when they show up. Yeah. There's room in your life for all of your emotions. The second thing is
and wait, let me jump in there too, because we were talking about expressing those emotions when you're talking to people, but it's also journaling is a great tool. If you're still uncomfortable expressing those to someone else, then write them down just so you are expressing them in some way.
Yeah, good. And then the second, physicality. Yeah. Be aware of when you're tired, when you're hungry, when your basic needs are going unmet. Meet them. Take this time to be at home and practice meeting your needs. Simple.
Yes.
It's simple. I mean, it ought to be simple, and it can be simple, and sometimes it's not automatic. So making the shift takes work.
Yeah, and when those basic needs aren't met, we revert back to the child temper tantrum stage. Like there's so many ways that adults throw their own little temper tantrums, and it's because some basic needs aren't being met, and they're not listening to themselves. They're not listening to their body or to their inner child.
Right.
Yes.
Yep. And so the third one was the mentality. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts telling you? What's your worldview? Are you aware of all the things that are running you? All your motivations. Have you looked at your motivations? Look at those. Yeah. Look at your triggers, your motivations, and your general attitudes and perspectives. Get clear about what is the script for your life, and you can make any changes that you want.
Yeah, and I would say, but beliefs, I mean, that's a good word to put in there. And when I say beliefs, like, we're not talking about big religious beliefs. It's just the little things that you have adopted to believe about yourself or others. And a lot of that is judgment, really, Yeah. So looking at your triggers is another important word, looking at things that you have adopted into beliefs and looking at ways that you're triggered and then realizing that they're both there for a reason. Neither are who you really are. And by doing the child work, it's a great way to dig in, to see them from another perspective, to see them from a bigger perspective, and then to help release them, And especially as an adult, if you are now a parent, you have an amazing gift to see things from the other side and realize how difficult it is to parent and how easily you can do something for the good of your child and they don't understand, and use that when you go back and look at scenes from your childhood to try to understand the perspective of your parents too, and help to forgive them and release that.
Yeah. Well, exactly right. And then the fourth was be with yourself in a new way. Make a space in your life, because you do have space. If you say you don't, it's just an excuse. You do have space. You can make space in your life to be with yourself differently. Take some calming time. Take some time to process yourself. Whatever it is, just take some time and treat yourself differently so you can be differently. The other part that we're about to get into with the meditation is creative problem solving. We are all facing this huge question in our lives, bigger than ever, because now it's impacting our daily lives, right? We always have had the question of what's the future going to bring? Well, now we're looking at this whole global question of what's the future going to bring? Now something different is in our face than has ever been there before, and our lives are upset by it. So we have an opportunity to treat this as an opportunity to grow. And we can grieve and make a space for all the things that we're upset about, because that's appropriate. We have a lot to be upset about. And then we can get past that upset and process it and go to, okay, well, where's the gold? Where's the gift in this experience? Where can I grow through this? It may not be financially. Maybe we got to put that on hold. But there's so many ways that we as humans can grow. We're not just busy bee providers. We're not just workers, right? That's what we've fallen into. This is an upset. We can define ourselves and our worth from somewhere else, and our creative power can be unleashed. So before we go to the meditation, is there anything that either of you would like to add?
Well, one of the things that is my favorite thing that, if I really want to get into my heart space, I always ask the question, and this is a question that bypasses the mind. The mind can't answer this question, is what is the most loving thing that I can do for myself right now? Because if you find yourself not being in that loving space, but maybe just ignoring a basic need. So if you go to what is the most loving thing I can do for myself, your heart will answer that. And it could just be take a couple deep breaths, or go take a walk, or eat something. Could be the most basic, simple things. But I find that to be a really powerful tool that I use. And another way of saying it as well is, what is the most loving way that I can be with myself right now?
Yeah. And I want to add on to that, and then we will wrap up. When we talk about self-love and self-care, because it's a huge piece that's missing from so many people's lives is because there's so much going around us. We're so busy, whether it's work and worry about paying bills and living in this crazy society and social media and emails and texts inundating us. Like there's so many things outside of us that are constantly distracting us and inundating us. And then on top of that, if you have your own family, like forget it, you're trying to take care of your kids and all that kind of stuff, that there is, and Sam made this point that there's always time to create space for yourself and for caring for yourself. And it can be something like putting a half hour aside. And if you have kids, tell them, like do not disturb, go take, a nice salt bath and give yourself some time, maybe even listen to a meditation, while you're in the bath. Things like that. But even on the smallest levels, there's still ways, just little ways of caring for yourself and acknowledging yourself. And that's one of the most important things when we get into these mindsets and beliefs and when we're being triggered and things like that, just taking a moment to pause and care enough for yourself to say like, okay, I might be triggered, I might be overreacting, or what other people are saying may not be true, and checking in with yourself. And this really ties back to, and this is a great way to really put things in perspective for people, is because I don't feel there's enough self-care in the world. If you think of it and see it as caring for a child, because that's really what it comes down to. Any beautiful little innocent child, if they're, especially if they're hurt, a child falls and scrapes their knee or something like that, every adult around will come running. Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? But as an adult, when we fall emotionally, it's not the same. A lot of times we're blamed or we're told to get over it or move on or whatever. And there's not that care from around us, and it falls on us to give that care to ourselves, to see ourselves and our needs as a child. And that's that inner child that needs to be cared for, needs to be loved. And it's okay and it's important to nurture ourselves as a parent nurtures a child. It's so important.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. So while we're in this space together, we have created a space here together, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and being here. Let's extend the space a little longer and claim some quiet time if that's possible. And even if it's not possible, you can still claim presence here, even if it's not quiet. I invite you to close your eyes and it doesn't matter what you focus on because it's all you. Focus on your breathing, focus on a feeling that's strong, focus on the most obvious thing about yourself in this moment. Maybe it's a distraction in your environment. Maybe it's a noise in the background. It's still your ears that are picking that up, so that's still you. Let that noise take you inside. Let the feeling take you inside. Let go of any thoughts about what that's supposed to look or feel like. Just trust that it's happening. And I invite you to turn your focus towards your chest. Bring your world close to the spot where you would hold your cat or hold your baby, and just hold yourself there. Imagine that that's where your attention is going, right to the space immediately in front of your heart. And what shows up for you in that space right now? Allow that to become the entirety of your focus. Just watch, just observe, feel. Allow whatever is right here to engage your senses, to engage your mind, to engage your inquisitiveness. Whatever thought, whatever image is in your mind's eye right now, is exactly the right one to be focusing on. Trust the process. And now focus your awareness on your emotion. What emotion is on top? Are you mad? Are you sad? Are you glad? Are you afraid? Or are you ashamed? Which of those emotions is on top? On top being the strongest, most evident one. And take a breath in and allow that feeling to be in you. Feel that feeling. Be with that feeling. Get comfortable with it. And now bring your awareness to your mind. What thoughts are going through your mind right now? Maybe you're thinking about the future, making lunch, or the next thing to do when this is done. Whatever thoughts you're thinking, allow them to just be thoughts. We don't have to engage in them. We can watch them. We can observe them. Allow there to be, if it's possible for you, a space between your emotion and your thought. Allow them to become separate objects. And notice, do our thoughts create our emotions? What emotions are we having about our thoughts? And conversely, what thoughts do we have about our emotions? We're just slowing down the speed for a moment so we can catch the details. God knows life moves fast enough. We're taking a moment to slow it down. We're unpacking the ball of wax, the overwhelming piece. Just slowing it down to a crawl, taking a snapshot. What's the most intense or most evident thought in your mind's eye right now? And what feeling is attached to it? And just that one piece will give you a very important part of yourself to explore. There's a relationship there. What does that thought, what does that emotion motivate within you? Our thoughts are not our self-will. Our self-will is different. And so often our self-will blindly follows our thoughts and our feelings. So this is a chance to change that. By looking at that thought, looking at that emotion, separating from them, even just a little, is a success and a step towards grounding peace and a deeper awareness and self-mastery. That we can sit back in our own self-will and be the eye of the storm. We can be completely calm. This space is naturally within us. It was built into us, baked into the program. Whether we take advantage of it or not is an entirely different thing. So this is one way that we can tap into it. Slow it down to a crawl. Step back and observe. Disengage from the feeling. The feeling doesn't have to create an action. That's reactionism. We can sit back and look and choose to respond. That's responsiveness. And so you've just taken a really brilliant moment that maybe you thought you couldn't take, or maybe you do regularly, but you just did it. You just slowed down life. You slowed down yourself. You claimed a precious, self-loving moment. And you can do it again anytime. It just takes the choice to do it. There are no thoughts and no emotions that are more powerful than us. It may feel like it. But when we step back and allow ourselves to observe ourselves, something brilliant can happen. We can realize that there's more to us than we thought there was. There's more room, there's more space. We're not as full and compressed as we might think we are. We might feel we are. There's always more room inside of us. Claim that space. Take a moment for yourself, especially when you're hungry, especially when you're tired, especially when you're upset. Those are red flag moments. Those are times to check in. So I thank you for sitting with me and allowing me to take you through that. I hope it was beneficial for you. You can ground yourself by acknowledging your breath, opening your eyes, whatever that might look like for you. How is everybody doing? You can chime in, you can thumb up, you can throw the hearts up there. That's always fun to watch them float up the screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam.
You're welcome. Thank you for holding the space with me.
Yes. And thank you, Wendi. And for those of you that weren't fully aware of what Wendi was doing, I mean, it looked like she might have just been sitting there meditating, but she was also, well, will you explain it, Wendi?
Well, I was just holding the most just amazing sacred space, and opened it up for any and all healing to happen on all levels.
Yeah. So thank you. So yeah, Sam and Wendi, I love you both. You're awesome. And Wendi, thank you so much for being with us and for joining us today. And a huge thank you for you doing the work and connecting and healing your child and allowing it to come out and express and to play all the time, because it is what makes you who you are today and the wonderful being that we all love to be around. So thank you for being that example and for doing the work, and you too, Sam, because you're a huge part of it. The two of you together are awesome. And so if anybody's looking to, for some help and for some guidance and for really doing some inner work, connect with Sam and Wendi. They're awesome. WendiRose.com. Anything else you guys want to add?
I will always keep talking.
I meant about plugging.
Oh. You can find more information about us at WendiRose.com.
Mm-hmm.
There is a link there to our various services, and pertinent to today's topic is the Inner Child Reconnection Program. If you're aware that there's a big piece of shadow or inner child work that you want to do, you're not alone. It is everyone has something. So it's the matter of, are you ready to make that change in your life? Are you ready to heal that? Are you ready to transcend past the limitation that past traumas are holding you in? It's a choice. And there are tools and there are pathways to healing, and healing is natural. Wounds heal. It's what we do. It's just what happens when a wound heals and life force is applied to it. The proper tendering is applied to it. We also, even if it's not that, we also do coaching and just general general supportive services. Wendy's services with IET and with her Peace Rose Healing are phenomenal ways to help shift your energy. We can do everything long distance, which is fantastic during this time where we're socially distancing. Doesn't mean that you can't do crucial inner work. Our tools work very well long distance.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at more practical means, developing strategies or plans, or it's not maybe a deep piece of transitioning, maybe there's a cognitive or a perspective shift that you want to make. We have coaching services that also support people in looking at the practical things from a different angle, and also creating new plans of action. And there's a whole lot of new things that we have an opportunity to look at. So we're here to assist. We are able to do everything online, thank God. And we're just so happy to be here. We love supporting people.
Yes, we do.
It is our purpose, and help us connect to our purpose by showing up and becoming a more vibrant, amazing you. We love watching that whole process happen.
Awesome. And Awaken has a lot going on during this time. We typically have a lot going on at the center. A lot of what we're doing, easily translates online. So this Spirituality Live we do twice a month, first and third Wednesday, 11:11 a.m. On the opposite Wednesdays, the second and fourth Wednesdays, I do a guided meditation journey. And I call it a journey because it's really channeled through me. It's very visual, very detailed, what we go through, what we experience, what we see. And on occasion, I'm either feeling or guided to specific topics. So I also like tying it in with our Spirituality Live. So for next Wednesday, I'll do an inner child meditation, and whatever is happening at the center. The meditations are online now. Pranic Healing, that's twice a month. That's online. Our Talking Stick Circle, that's also online. We're doing as much as we can to still put stuff online. And a lot of what we do is just free donation based. And if you want to donate to Awaken, you can always go on to awakenche.org/donate. And if you want to see what events are happening with Awaken or in the community, go to the Awaken website, awakenche.org. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Meetup. So there's lots of ways that we're putting ourselves out there to help everybody in general, and especially during this time. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Sam and Wendy.